we find by the craftsmen of the Mishkan, as it says that God put chokhmah b'chachmei leiv, God put wisdom into the hearts of those who had wisdom. So we'd mentioned in the name of the Balaturim, Ruchai Velosha speaks about this at length in the Nefesh HaChaim, that the heart that already contained chokhmah, wisdom, Hashem added wisdom to give them the ability to develop whatever they have to develop, to be artisans at the most advanced level. But in addition, since every component of the Mishkan corresponded to an act of creation, there was a certain understanding of the mindset that you had to have to infuse that component with a certain intent that it should function as part of creation. As we mentioned, the Gemara says that Betzalel, who oversaw the whole Mishkan, he knew how to conjugate the letters of the Aleph base, how creation came about. But it says Betzalel was Lachshav Machshavos. What does it mean, Lachshav Machshavos? He understood the intents. So he said something beautiful. When the people brought the various materials to the Mishkan, the gold, the silver, and the copper, if you remember, it says Shumal Hashem, they had to bring it as a tithing for God. Yichul li Shumal Lishmi. Two people do a mitzvah, lishma, for the sake of the mitzvah, for the sake of God, based on who the person is, what level of Yerushalayim he has, what level of reverence or fear of heaven or love of God, the various levels. At each level which the person is at, when he does the mitzvah is infused with that level of intent based on who the person is. As a result of that, the dimension and the effect and the viability of that mitzvah is a different mitzvah because of who the person is. What level of Yerushalayim do you have? What level of Avos Hashem do you have? And that makes that determination what the quality of a mitzvah is. When the people brought the gold, the silver, the copper, with the various materials, and each material, for instance, the gold that was used for the Oron, the old Oron, which contained the first set of luchos which were broken, the unbroken set, the second, the Torah itself, which had the kruvim, the cherubs on the slab, which covered the Oron. That was the holiest vessel. That was the repository of Torah. That's where the Shekhinah, the divine presence, would rest and would communicate with Moshe. It was Mibein Shnei HaKruvim, between the cherubs. That was the holiest vessel. So although you had an enormous amount of gold, which multiple people gave gold, but that gold needed a special level of kavanah. That needed a special level of person. When he gave it at the most advanced level of Yerushalayim, the highest level of Avos Hashem. Now, how do you determine that? Everybody's bringing gold. You have 1,000 people bringing gold. Each person's a different level. How do you know whose gold was given with a more advanced level of intent, with greater love, with greater reverence, with greater fear? How do you know that? That's Lachshav Machshavos. Betzalel was endowed with the ability that he was able to evaluate the gold qualitatively, spiritual infusion-wise, what level was the gold, and as a result of that, he was able to allocate the gold to various vessels based on the intent of the person, the people who brought that gold. That's Lachshav Machshavos. That was also part of the endowment which Betzalel was given to be able to make that evaluation of who yes and who not. Which gold should go where and what should be allocated for which vessel. It's a phenomenal concept. You say gold is gold. Gold is not gold. Because we had said, "B'leiv kol chacham leiv nosan chacham." In the heart of every wise man, he gave wisdom. That was Yerushalayim. So every person, so let's say the ones who brought gold, seems to be, they didn't have to have any special level of Yerushalayim. They wanted to be reinstated, and that was the value of the various materials that were needed. We needed to create this edifice, which was, so God's presence should dwell in that edifice. And the ones who needed that special endowment of wisdom were the ones who actually developed it, which is true, as the Ramban says. People with a background as mortar and brick, how do they have this ability? The answer is they had that endowment. But even the ones who brought it, they had to be at a certain level, and based on the level they were, that would determine exactly where that material was put. You had the parochas. The parochas separate between the holy and the holy of holies. The heichal, the covered sanctuary, and where the ark was. So the parochas also was special. You had the gold mizbeach, which was in the heichal also, which was the Ketores. You had the menorah, which activated all the siyata d'shmaya for the understanding of Torah. So therefore, each vessel had its unique value, and each one was greater than the other. Therefore, those who donated the materials had to be greater, and who was able to make the determination? Betzalel was able to make that determination. Question.
Why wouldn't all of the gold that was used for the Aron, etc., have been chosen by Betzalel to come from the Levim, given their better behavior during the course of the golden?
We find that the Levim, when they were counted from the age of 30 days and above. The rest of the tribes, when they were counted from the age of 20 years and above, in terms of the numbers. The ordinary Jew was counted when he became eligible for conscription, was Yotzei Tzova is at the age of 20. The Levim was from the age of 30 days. Why? Why were they counted from the age of 30 days and not the age of 20? So Rashi over there explains, because since ultimately Hashem would do, they would get the sin with the sin of the golden calf. So he wanted, at the Levim did not participate in the Chet Egel. They were called the Legion of the King. So what he was going to give the decree that anybody between the age of 20 and 60 will die over that 40-year period, the Levim should not be included in that decree. Only those between 20 and 60. And because the Levim were counted from the age of 30 days and above, therefore they were not included in the decree. Now, all those who were included in that decree, you mean every person lacked in faith and didn't believe what Yoshua and Caleb had said? Of course they believed. It could have been a significant minority, did not go with the 10 spies. But what was the decree? The decree is on Klal Yisrael. Being on Klal Yisrael, everybody's impacted. For instance, the Chet Egel. Originally, all the Jews were endowed with 2 crowns of distinction, spiritual distinction, when we said Nasav Nishma. When the Chet Egel took place, every Jew forfeited that spiritual level of distinction, including the Levium. But why? The Levium, as clearly it's indicated, they were opposed to it. And when Moshe Rabbeinu says, Mil Hashem Eli, every one of them came and followed Moshe's order. So they were not included. But yet, every one of them forfeited that spiritual distinction. The answer is because everybody, if you're part of Klal Yisrael, whatever decree comes on Klal Yisrael, you're a victim of that decree. Every Jew, it was pronounced, Jews have to be between 20 and 60 have to perish during the 40-year period. You could have had tzaddikim people who were opposed to it. Doesn't make a difference. But if you're part of the group, the decree was on the group, on Klal Yisrael. The Levim, because they were counted as a separate group, they were not part of the decree. So therefore, there are many people who, as individuals, we're talking about individuals here. We're not talking about tribes. As individuals, they could have been much more advanced than the Levim, even regarding opposition to idolatry. Their belief in God, their love of God, their reverence could have been more than the Levim. But one thing has nothing to do with another. So those individuals, because here we're talking about individuals, we're not talking about Klal Yisrael as a whole. As a result of that, their gold was more eligible and more qualified for the Aron or the menorah than even a Levi's gold, because he was more advanced. Vayavo kol ish asher neso libo. And every man who was inspired by his heart. V'chol asher nodvo rucho, also. And all those who was spirit was generous, of a generous spirit, was motivated by his generous spirit. Heviu as chumas Hashem l'vechasol moed. They brought the tithing of Hashem for the work that was needed for the Ol Moed. Ulechol avodosol b'dei hakodesh. So we'll see in a moment. I always speak about such a fundamental Orach Chaim HaKodesh. We find this pasuk. There were two groups of people. There was called Isha Shen Neso Libo, the person who was inspired by his heart, and the person who had a generous spirit. Now, the word Ish is always an adjective used for what? For somebody of special distinction. Like the Gemara says, Ish v'lo koton, an adult and not a minor. Ish is always somebody of special stature. So we speak about Ish, we only find the Ish associated with the soul libo. It doesn't say, V'chol Ish asher nod v'rucho. So evidently, the soul libo is a more advanced level than nod v'rucho. And therefore, the one who is the soul libo, who is inspired by his heart, that's Ish. It's a person of greater distinction. Nod v'rucho, which is less, the word Ish is not associated with that person. So over here, if you have a Bekaros Gedolos Chumash, the Orach Chaim HaKodesh, he says in Pasuk Chof Aleph, Da, he says you should know, Ki yesh shnei hadrogos b'misnadvim, the two classifications of donors when it came to the Mishkan. Ha'echadu ha'misnadi b'rotzen nafsho, kvi echoto v'erich momono. One person he gives based on his financial ability and his ability to give. That's the person who gives due to his generosity. I'm a generous person, I give. How much do you give? Based on the degree of generosity, based on the degree of wealth that you have. It's not I'm giving it because I'm pained. Wait 1 second. Some people give, they're pained, they can't give, they don't want to give. Right? It's I feel conscious-wise I have to give. No, generous. They give generously, but how much do they give? They give according to their ability. The other person, he gives beyond his capacity due to the goodness of his heart. Let's say Yikra Nesol Libo. Pirush. What is the meaning of Nesol Libo? Shalev menaseu ubaricho be'erech osher. His heart elevates him, advances him to be evaluated as if he's giving like a wealthy person who's not, although he's not a wealthy person. He's a person that is beyond his means. Yosemashu loses yoker. Even more than his capacity to give something which is very precious. What does that mean? A person where you exist for a purpose. And something has to be addressed and something has to be taken care of. And you have limited means, but you exist for that. You don't think about your level of limitation. Your focus is on that has to be addressed. A person who does not value it to that degree, but he values the purpose, but the emphasis is not that, and he values himself also to agree, then he thinks about himself. I'll give as much as I can. As long as it doesn't compromise me, I will give generously. How much generously? As much as I could. The other person doesn't think about how much he could give. The other person's focus is what has to be addressed has to be addressed. He doesn't think about himself, what the consequence to himself will be, that he'll be left with less. All that matters is that has to be addressed. The Mishkan has to be built. Hashem's presence has to be reinstated. Our relationship has to be reinstated. That's all that matters. So that person, he gives beyond his ability because he doesn't think about himself. All he thinks about is the objective. So we have two classifications of people. When we speak on the soul libo, this person gives beyond his means, although he's not as wealthy as someone else, but because to the degree that he understands the importance of what has to be supported, he gives. Therefore, he deserves the appellation of Ish. He is a man of stature, of distinction. Nadvu libo, comparatively speaking, he's not Ish. He is something special, but not at that special level. Therefore, only the soul libo has the word Ish associated with it, and not Nadvu rucho. 1 second. Therefore, among the Jews, there were two classifications. So the first, we begin with the more advanced level. Who was the first to give? Asher ish asher in the soul libo. Vama called ish soul libo. V'diktek lo batevas ish. Loshen chashivus. And it's, you notice it says ish. Ucheneged asheni oma v'chol asher dod v'rucho. The word ish is not there. Loma ish ki eno choshe be'er chodishim. Because he's not at the same level as the first classification. It's a lesser level. This is the Orach Chaim HaKodesh. Umimotze dover ato yodea kilo b'chol hamisnadvim elebeis hadrogos. So among all that gave, there were these two levels. The more advanced, the less, but they were both special. Ubeis l'shevach. The Torah is pointing out both are praiseworthy. That even the person gives as much as he can, but he's giving enormously. Shenadvu libo lo osu hadav b'chson rotzna leiv elo she'echad godol b'shechavero. It's not one felt, the second felt, I must give. It's not because he must give. Because some people give because others give, and if he doesn't give, he looks like less of a person. No, they gave. Even the less level, the second category was out of generosity of the hearts. They just wanted this advance. Advance is the first. So diktek loma heviu as trumas Hashem. They brought it. Lirmos the bechinas the loma sheremas beomro yivias trumas Hashem. They brought trumas Hashem. They brought it l'shem shamayim for the sake of God. Moshe Pirush Rashu Shob Shechavin Elamusko the ikro b'nidvas alev. The other infusion that I'm doing for the sake of God, therefore it says nidvas libo. It's the heart. The heart has to do with the kavanah. What is the intent? The intent of the person. I'll give you an example. In Ashrei we say, Korov Hashem Chol Korov. It's an acrostic, Ashrei. Hashem is close to all those who call him. Asher Yikru ve'emes. Those who call him with truth. What is the meaning? Asher Yikru ve'emes. So the simple understanding, which it is, that if a person calls out to God and he's sincere, ve'emes, with truth, it's not just lip service. You're just not saying words, but you call him with sincerity, with dedication. God is closest to those, which he is. He's close to all those who call him. The ones who call him with emes, with truth, with that sincerity, where we said pivali b'shovim. What you're saying, that's what you feel in your heart. Like we're saying here, not verucho. The libo is the what? Is the intent. But you could say something else. Now, we find the Torah referred to as emes. The only thing which is truthful on the absolute level is the Torah itself. We say chosam shel kodesh baruch hu emes. The signet of God is truth. The Torah being His wisdom, it's truth on the absolute level. And we always quote the pasuk which the Gemara quotes from Mishlei, Shlomo says, emes kanev al timkor. Acquire truth, don't sell truth. So truth is quantified as emes. A person who's a great Talmud Chacham, what does he possess? The person who calls to God, the one who calls to Hashem, and he calls to him, what is his representation? What's his weaponry? His weaponry is emes, because he is a repository of Torah. So the more Torah, the greater the person is Torah-wise, Hashem is close to that person. And he responds to that person's supplication more than a person who has less emes, who doesn't have as much Torah. So you have two people, Talmidei Chachomim, and one is greater than the other. And he has a greater representation of emes. Hashem will respond, will be closer to that person than the person who has less emes, who has less Torah. It's a different dimension of person. You have two people, not Varucho, Naso Rucho, not Valibo, whatever it is. It's a different level. Even though they're giving generously. Only God knows how to make this evaluation. And that's what we're speaking about over here. One is Ish. The other person, relatively speaking, is not categorized as Ish, that person of that special distinction. You find there were three metals, Zov, Kes, and Nechoshes. So the Medrash says it's the Yalkut. Zov, Ze Mishkan Shel Moshe. Zov alludes to the Mishkan of Moshe Rabbeinu. Why is it called Zov? She'haya'ov la Kodesh Baruch Hu Kizov. It was beloved to God as if it was gold. Its status was the gold standard. Kesef Ze Bayis Rishon. Silver, which is more precious than copper, that's Bayis Rishon. Why? Because Bayis Rishon, it had everything there. There were no deficiencies. But it didn't have the status of what Moshe oversaw was involved with. Nechoshes Ze Bayis Sheni. She'echosem Chomish Dvorim. There were 5 things that were lacking by Sheni. Of course, in Aramaic, Nechushta means it was from the bottom. So Zov is Mishkan Shemot. That was the ultimate level. To be able to have a relationship with Hashem at that level, that's only temporary. That's a temporary situation. That's Mishkan Shel Moshe Rabbeinu. Bayis Rishon, that Shlomo oversaw the building of that. Shlomo Melech wasn't even his father, was not David. The only reason why David purchased the location for the Beis HaMikdash, he did not build the Beis HaMikdash. Why did David not build as much as he wanted to build it? Because David was a warrior. He conquered Israel. He conquered the land, and because he was a warrior and he shed blood, although it was for God's glory, therefore Hashem says, it's for your son to do, it's not for you to do. And your son has that endowment of that special wisdom, he will build it. But David, as a person of holiness, was much greater. David Melech Shel Chai V'Kayim. David was on his own level, as David is the 4th leg of the Kisei HaKavod. That's David. David is Avdi. David is referred to by Hashem as Avdi. He's my servant. As Moshe was Avdi, David was Avdi. That's how special David was. But factually, because he was involved in the conquest and he led the battles, he didn't qualify to build the Beis HaMikdash. Okay? So again, the Menucha is Yerushalayim. The Mishkan had nothing with location. The Mishkan was wherever you built it, that's where God's presence came. Had nothing to do with location. We traveled in the desert, wherever they disassembled, they reassembled it. Where it was reassembled, that's where the Shekhinah was. Once we come to Yerushalayim, it's there, nowhere else. Has nothing to do with assembly, disassembly. That's where it is.